Number one for the one and only DNVR. 2 goes out to Zach, Mase, RK, and the bar. 3 for Mr. B in that old trophy case. Number 4 we're still waiting for. Well, bring on the chase. Out on the field, a mile high, Broncos win is our desire. Couple with a breakfast crew and a friend, bleed orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us at the DNVR. We are DNVR.
All right, welcome in to the DNVR Broncos post-game show presented by Breckenridge Brewery. Big shout out to Breckenridge Brewery for bringing this to us. And, of course, for producing damn good beers all the time. And, Mase, I think there was a part of everyone that knew this was a possibility today. And the Broncos just didn't have it. Didn't have it on offense. They did have it on defense, which we'll talk about here in a second. They certainly didn't have it on special teams. And in the end, you got to have it in all 3 phases if you're going to beat this Kansas City Chiefs football team. And what happens is the Broncos get blown out.
Well, they did have it mostly on defense. But that being said, I don't think the defense escapes without some shame in this. Too many missed tackles. You take a look at that first touchdown run by Clyde Edwards-Helaire back in the first quarter, and you've got missed tackles left and right. Honestly, nobody, coaches, players, except the occasional guy like Bradley Chubb. Okay, so maybe not nobody, but very few players or coaches come off looking good out of this disaster. This was farcical at times.
Yeah, you know what? Like, I'm really proud of the defense. I thought they did enough today to keep the Denver Broncos in this football game. Unfortunately, like I said, I said it on Twitter. I just said it now. You got to be good to great in all 3 phases if you're going to beat this team. In the end, it looks so ugly, mostly because of a pick 6 from Drew Lock, which is a terrible throw, and a kick return touchdown. You take those away, and going into the fourth quarter, this is a 1-score game. So, yes, you can't take those away. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is the defense, I felt like, held their own in a way that they can be proud of this performance and in a way that I feel good about them moving forward against other football teams.
Yeah, but again, it wasn't perfect. I think if you're encouraged by Bradley Chubb getting another sack. You're encouraged by the fact that they kept the Chiefs in front of them, so you can kind of start getting into that rush and cover equation. But if you're gonna have these meltdowns in other phases of the game, I mean, what's the point? I mean, if you don't have the return scores, it's a 1-score game. You've also got the offense doing dumbass things like trying a flea flicker when you're actually having some success, momentum running the ball. You're getting to midfield, and then just an ill-advised call and a very poor execution of said call by Melvin Gordon. I think, and it's actually interesting to think about who Broncos country is angriest at right now. Is it Melvin Gordon or is it somebody else?
Well, based on my mentions, it's Drew Lock, and I think we need to talk about Drew Lock first and foremost here because this is the main topic in Broncos country right now. This is Drew's 8th full game. The Broncos are 5-3 in those games, and the last 2 now, Drew's stats have looked really poor. They won last week. They obviously get crushed this week. Drew didn't do enough. Mase, I'll start with you. Just your evaluation of Drew Lock today.
It's starting to look like Mizzou for me as I watch him. And what I mean by that is I'm seeing the mistakes that caused him to be a 2nd-round pick at Mizzou, coming out of Mizzou. You're seeing some of the back foot throws that are leading to accuracy issues. You're seeing some stare downs of receivers. You're seeing more so last week on that 2nd interception, but a little bit of trying to play hero ball at times. And it's kind of the big picture that I have a concern because since I've seen all these miscues before, I don't know that he's getting any better. And you start wondering, is this just who he is? And that's the fear I have.
For me, I continue to see signs from him. Today's a bad game. Straight up bad game from Drew Lock. The pick six was a really bad throw off his back foot, which was a consistent issue throughout this football game. I thought he was pressing, knowing what they were up against from an offensive standpoint. I thought that his ball placement was off throughout the game. I think that if there's anything we learned for sure today, it's that Drew Lock's certainly not comfortable in snow and cold temperatures, which is something that could rear its ugly head, over time in Denver.
Yeah. The Texas kid looks like he's been in it his entire life, referring to Patrick Mahomes, of course.
He's a freak. He's a freak of nature. You can't compare to him.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, who are the other guys from climates like that who have looked pretty good? Brett Favre, coming from out of Kill, Mississippi, down near the Gulf, comes to mind. To another Packer quarterback. And Zach's not here, so I can say this. Aaron Rodgers comes from San Diego. It never affected him. So it's curious that this is two games that Drew Lock has played in the snow, and they've both been off. But I'm also not putting too much on the conditions here. I mean, you had some wind, it was cold, but those aren't the reasons why Drew Lock struggled today.
What in your opinion is the reason Drew Lock struggled today?
I think there's not one reason. There's several reasons. I think to kind of go back to an earlier point, the fact that he's reverting to some bad habits, the fact that you're seeing those back foot throws, he's not stepping into his throws the way that you want. It's a concern I have, because you can do everything on the practice field right to kind of correct those things, to turn a flaw into a strength. But if you revert to the old habits at game time, what good is it going to do? And I don't want to give Broncos fans the shakes here on this, but it reminds me a little Brock Osweiler. Remember the work that they put in to try to make sure he was delivering more over the top rather than that little sidearm thing that he had going on coming out of ASU. And, in practice, he'd do fine, but you got to the game, you got to full speed, got to where you're working under duress. And it's just kind of human nature. We all sort of, when we're under duress, we revert to some things that are ingrained. And so it's fair to wonder, is this just something that's going to be part and parcel of who he is, and how do you work around it if that's the case?
I think you're right on a lot of accounts. I think footwork to me was the biggest issue today. And I think there's a bunch of reasons why that happened. He was under duress for sure. I think like I said earlier, I think he's just uncomfortable in these conditions, and I think that forces him to kind of fall back on some bad habits.
That's a problem when you play in Denver, Colorado. This ain't Tampa.
Absolutely. But that, you lead me in exactly to my biggest point here. Mase, this is his 8th full game in the NFL. It's not like it's been 2 full seasons of this kid starting. It hasn't even been half of 1 season yet. And people are ready to write the entire book on Drew Lock. They want to see him beat the Chiefs. He didn't beat the Chiefs. They weren't even close. And because of that, they're ready to write the book on him. And I just don't get it. Like, around the league, it's a accepted notion that young quarterbacks have to have time to develop. They either have to have time to sit behind a better quarterback and learn, or they have to have time to get into the football game and figure it out from there. And Drew Lock is in that process right now. So I think the Justin Herbert thing is really screwing up everyone's perspective of this, because Justin Herbert walks in and he's been awesome. One after another. Awesome. Today, they're finally going to get their first win with him. So he has that monkey off his back. And I just think people are looking at that and it's making them rush to judgment on Drew Lock. I'm not ready to judge Drew Lock until he has in terms of, I shouldn't say I'm not ready to judge him, because I actually am ready to judge him. I think I see a lot of the things that he needs to have. Now, there's plenty of other things that he needs to improve on, but that is the point of this. That's the point of getting all these games. That's the point of a young developing offense. You can't write a quarterback off this early in his career, especially Mase, especially when he's 5-3 in his starts, with 2 of his losses coming to the Super Bowl champions from last season, who won the Super Bowl last year. Both of those games, by the way, in the snow. And the other one coming against the Tennessee Titans, who very clearly seem to be one of the best teams in football this year. So I just can't believe the fact that people are ready to write the book on Drew Lock in his 8th full game as an NFL player.
Yeah, and that's why I think you need to just let the season play out. How many times have we said that this year is about evaluating Drew Lock?
A million.
Maybe even more important than anything you accomplish as a team. That you could go 6-10, but if Drew Lock showed that he was the guy, end of discussion. Then it was a successful year. I think you mentioned Justin Herbert. I think that is something that is it's not fair, but it's looming over him. But
sure.
also just in general, I mean, we've seen in the last few years quarterbacks be able to be microwaved a little bit. And, because it's not just Justin Herbert, it's seeing Patrick Mahomes. Deshaun Watson had a 101.5 rating in his first 8 starts. Lamar Jackson, 99.6. And yet it's still possible that he might be Josh Allen.
Yeah,
Josh
for sure.
Allen, not good in his first 9 starts.
No, not at all.
But what was interesting, he had a 66.1 rating, and you know me, I'm not a QB wins guy. The Bills were 4-5. The Bills were actually competitive with Josh Allen, and there were some signs, and things started to come together for him after that. So is that that's the template I think you're hoping for here, is that the fact that with Josh Allen, the performance didn't match up to the win-loss total, which was respectable, and then eventually things normalized. You're hoping that's the case with Drew Lock, but the problem is then you start saying, okay, what is his ceiling? If he reaches his ceiling, where can he go? And I think the other thing that, and seeing this in people in tweeting at me during the game, there were a few people that noted that they feel like their perception of Drew Lock's ceiling is dropping. And is that and that's a concern, I think, in Broncos country too.
So I think that's the thing that has changed the least for me. To me, Drew Lock's ceiling is very clear. He has everything you could want from a quarterback. He has it between the ears. He has it with his arm. He has athletic ability to get out of the pocket and make plays with his feet. So to me, every game, I get more confident in the ceiling. What I think has moved, like what moves in a game like today is your belief in whether or not he's getting closer to that ceiling or if he's staying where he's been. Eventually, Drew Lock has to start moving towards the ceiling. Today, you certainly didn't see him get closer to the ceiling. Anyone can agree to that fact. Mm-hmm. He didn't get closer to his ceiling today. That's what you need to start seeing. But again, we're talking about his third full start in this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the snow against the Super Bowl champions. I'm not excusing the fact that he didn't get closer to the ceiling today, but it's not like just because he didn't, it's time to say, well, looks like he's regressing. Let's see how he plays next week against the Chargers.
Yeah.
When he gets to go head-to-head with Justin Herbert. He's got a whole slate of games ahead of him that we have to be able to evaluate him. The season is about evaluating Drew Lock. Not this week is all about evaluating Drew Lock. You don't have to make any decisions about Drew Lock right now. And in fact, I would be shocked unless every game from here on out looks like it did today, which I highly doubt, that the Broncos are even ready to make a black or white decision on Drew Lock after this season. So that's all I'm trying to push back on. There's just no reason to make a determination on Drew Lock right now because you didn't see what you wanted to see today.
Yeah, and you don't have to, but unfortunately, when you're in sports talk radio or podcasting, it is about snap judgments, and that's just the kind of thing that we end up having to do. I think it is important to say that you're not making the call today, but is he going in the right direction? At this moment, no, but there are ebbs and flows in every young player's development. That's why if I do look at the numbers, I focus more on the 9 start sample size rather than simply what he's doing in this moment. The problem, unfortunately, with that is his overall production is starting to work into that territory where it is decidedly hit or miss as far as what direction he's going to go. Whereas based on what he did late last year, if you just went by that 5-game sample size, you were saying, okay, there's a decent chance that he's going to work out. Now he's really in that territory where his path could fork in either direction, boom or bust here, or something kind of middling and in between. I think one thing, though, you don't have to make a decision today, obviously, but if Locke shows enough to where he does get another look for 2021, if he does well enough in the balance of the season to yield that, you can't do the Jeff Driscoll thing again as a backup quarterback. Your backup quarterback has to be somebody who can step in and play. And that's one thing that you kind of go back, looking over the course of the season. And I've thought this today. I said this to somebody kind of privately, and I'll just say it here publicly. That $8 million from Melvin Gordon could have probably been better spent on Jameis Winston.
That's
to come in for those games. But the point is, if Drew Lock has ups and downs the rest of the way, your backup quarterback, yeah, it has to be somebody who could push a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you want to know the truth, though, Mase, is that the Broncos don't feel comfortable bringing in a person like Jameis Winston because the fan base isn't patient enough to not be booing and chanting for Jameis Winston after Drew Lock throws 2 incompletions in a game. Like, that's just the facts. Look at the comment section right now.
I know.
It's unbelievable. Like, there's absolutely no patience in this town for quarterbacks. And we're, again, talking about his 8th full game in the NFL. So whether you like it or not, I'm not talking to you, but I'm talking just in general, the Broncos can't bring in a guy like Jameis Winston or even like a Marcus Mariota because then they have their fan base breathing down the neck of the guy that they hope is going to be their future franchise quarterback. And the truth is that is not positive for his development. It's just not. It hurts.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you have this, and if it's something that does lead to something negative in terms of the mental makeup, then that is part of the test of a young quarterback too, whether they can handle that or not.
But my point is the organization doesn't even want to take that risk.
And
they don't want it doesn't matter if it's Justin Herbert or Drew Lock or anyone else. They don't want early in a development the fan base chanting for the other guy. It's just it's not a good thing.
And it proved to be a mistake already because you might have won that Pittsburgh game, and you certainly would have been a lot more competitive against Tampa Bay as well. And the way that the defense did not let that game get out of hand as it progressed, who knows how it might have been different if you'd had somebody other than Driscoll handling the balance of the snaps. I mean, it's just there are other. I get where you're coming from, but that can't be a reason why you don't make sure that every position on the roster, starter or backup, is as good as it can be.
I'm with you. I'm just trying to say, like,
I know.
I don't think they want to put their quarterback in that position to have the fans chanting Jameis Winston's name today at the stadium.
Well, there wouldn't have been. There weren't enough of them.
Yeah, that's true. As we move forward, this is obviously the conversation. What on a surface level, what do you want to see from Drew Lock as he bounces back from this next week against the Chargers and moving forward this season to make you feel more comfortable?
I want to see him go through his progressions. I want to see him stare down his receivers less often. I want to see him look settled. I mean, it's one thing to be able to have that tool in your drawer with your arm talent to throw off balance when you're under duress. The problem is when you're seeing those back foot throws when you're in the pocket. He's got to show that what he's working on in practice is actually going to manifest itself in the game. I think that's a key. That is a key thing, and I've seen this too many times where you try to coach something into a guy and it just doesn't it just doesn't click on the field. And I've got to see some progress from Drew Lock that what he's learning in practice is going to manifest itself in the games.
For me, I want to see, and this goes for the Broncos as a young football team as well. It's not all on Drew Lock, but I want to see them show that they can beat very good teams. Because so far, through Drew Lock's career and through this Broncos season, we've seen they can't beat very good teams, and they can beat not very good teams and average teams. I'm not sure where we put the Patriots right now because I think we just need a little bit more information on them. Although the fact is today they got their tails whooped by the 49ers.
I think as I said on Twitter, the Broncos broke Cam again. You know, the Patriots look like they look like a bad football team. And
just weird because they looked like a really good football team for the first 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah, that they look great in a loss to Seattle. They look really good against the Raiders, but they're headed in the wrong direction right now. So it may be that the Broncos caught them at the moment when they were starting to fall apart. I mean, who knows? Maybe all the stuff with COVID and having the game moved, maybe it just knocked them off their rhythm in a way from which they're not going to be able to recover.
So I've been saying for a while now, especially when the whole tank for Trevor talk started, the Broncos are going to win about 50% of their games this season with Drew Lock under center. Right now, they are 1-2 with Drew Lock under center for the full game. I'm not going to count that Pittsburgh game because he didn't have a chance to impact that game really. And so here's the way the schedule shakes out. Broncos, Chargers, Broncos, Falcons, Broncos, Raiders, Broncos, Dolphins. Those are their next 4 games. They should probably get over 500 with Drew Lock in those next 4 games. You have a very good chance to win each and every one of those games. That is what I expect. But then they go Saints, Chiefs, Bills. In their last 5 games, they play the Saints, Chiefs, and Bills. I need them to show me. I want to see Drew Lock show me. I want to see this team show me that they have the ability to beat teams like that. Because we already know that they have the ability to beat bad and average teams. The next part of this hump, and again, this is a young football team that is developing. This is all part of their progression. It was going to take a miracle for them to beat the Chiefs today, or at least I think miracle is probably too strong a word. A 90 to 95% performance in terms of their potential. And they probably played 50% of their potential, maybe.
Yeah.
So that's something that I want to see throughout the rest of the season. I think that this team has what it takes to continue to win football games. And I think Drew Lock has what it takes to continue to beat these teams. But I know that all these people in the comments who don't believe in Drew Lock right now aren't going to start to change their mind until you beat a team like the Saints. So you beat a team like the Chiefs, which, on the road on Sunday Night Football in Arrowhead is going to be extremely difficult. Or even the Bills, who you get at home, that's going to start to change minds. And those are the games that they're going to have to win because they're not going to win all of these other ones. You're going to need some swing games in there.
Yeah, but the question is, are they good enough to run off a bunch of wins against lesser teams? And I would say probably teams that are either in the Broncos class or maybe a step below. I mean, you're playing the Chargers and, they finally figured out how to win with Justin Herbert, but the Chargers and the Broncos are probably right on the same level right now as teams. So that looks like a coin flip game at this point.
And it's a big game for just the narrative.
Right.
With Justin Herbert being on the other side.
Yeah. Atlanta, the interesting thing with Atlanta beyond that, if they don't blow this game today as they did, in typical Atlanta fashion, which is always spectacular, then we're talking about Atlanta being 2-0 with Raheem Morris as head coach.
Yep.
And now we're saying, okay, it's a bad team, but it is fundamentally a better team and it's playing harder right now than it did before than it did with Dan Quinn. So again, the Broncos should win, but it's an anything can happen kind of game. The Raiders, I think the Raiders are probably a couple of notches better than the Broncos right now. But if they go in and win that game, it would be like beating Houston last year, I think, in terms of the level of team that you're playing. And then Miami, I don't know. So basically, what we're saying here is, they could go 3-1. They could also go 1-3 in this. I mean, we really, one of the things that we kind of talked about going into this game is that there's not a game that you'd put in Sharpie as a win for the Broncos the rest of the way, but there's probably not one except maybe Kansas City on the road that you would put in Sharpie as an L at this point. And how many of those games are they going to win, or are they just going to normalize as being a 500 type team against the Chargers, the Falcons, the Dolphins, the Raiders? I mean, if I were putting money on an outcome for the next 4 games, RK, I'd probably put it on 2-2.
2-2, yeah. But I think that's probably where if DraftKings Sportsbook was setting odds on what the most likely record is in the next 4 games, it would probably be a 2-2. The Chargers are 2-4, the Falcons are 1-6, the Raiders are 3-3, the Dolphins are 3-3. I'm sure that DraftKings would probably have it. You should beat the Chargers and the Falcons, and you probably lose to the Raiders and the Dolphins. But again, you want to see better than that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned today, and I really believe this, is that this defense is good enough. This defense is bar none good enough to get this team wins on a week in, week out basis. This defense is not the one who threw a pick six, and this defense is not the one who allowed a kick return touchdown, which I don't care what you say about what was going to happen on those possessions. That both of those plays completely and utterly changed the game. And you can maybe overcome one of them when you're these Broncos against those Chiefs, but you definitely cannot overcome two of them. I think this defense, I don't think Patrick Mahomes converted a third down all day. I think they were 0 for 7 on third downs with Patrick Mahomes on the field, which is just
amazing,
astounding from this defense. When Patrick Mahomes is on the field, I think they scored either 23 or 26 points as an offense. That is a position where you should be able to win that football game. That's right where we would have had him if we had the Broncos winning. We probably would have said it needed to be 31-26. So this defense against the Chargers and the Falcons and the Raiders and the Dolphins, they're going to keep you in the game. Now, as Drew goes along in his development, he needs to find a way to help make enough plays for this team to win football games like that. Yeah.
In fact, even including the Chad Henne time, 0 for 8. So the Chiefs had a big fat 0 for on third downs.
And scored 43 points.
The Broncos held them to under 300 total yards for the game, 286. And at one point in the second and third quarters, there was a 4 possession stretch where Kansas City got 1 first down and their offense accounted for 3 points. And that was on a short field where they advanced the ball 1 yard. So 4 possessions, 3 points, 1 first down. And the Broncos gave up 17 in that span because of the 2 touchdowns. I mean, the Chiefs do put that in mind that you have to play a perfect game to beat them. But at the start, you cannot do what the Broncos did and have those self-inflicted wounds. Now, 3 games against the Chiefs for Vic Fangio, coaching this team against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. They've given up 23 points to the Chiefs offense every time. And remember that first game, of course, Matt Moore came in, but the Chiefs had a defensive touchdown, and they were doing okay, but not great moving the ball while Mahomes was out there before he got hurt. So they do what we've seen is they keep the Chiefs targets in front of them. They do a really good job at avoiding a lot of huge back-breaking explosive plays, 20 plus from this Chiefs offense. A lot of it is due to the kind of the zone coverage that you see from the Broncos. We've seen the pass rush be effective. Malik Reed was effective. Bradley Chubb was effective. They were getting Patrick Mahomes off balance from time to time, but if you can't get some help from the other 2 phases, all this progress that you're making against the Chiefs offense is going to be moot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's what's so frustrating about this game from my standpoint is like you take away those 2 massive blunders that made it that swung the scoreboard 14 points, and you just have a totally different game. I don't know if the Broncos win. They probably don't. But you don't end up coming away from this game looking at the scoreboard thinking, man, the Broncos had no chance. They're still not even anywhere near the same class as the Kansas City Chiefs, which is probably the case. But you feel a little bit better today if you go ahead and just keep this close, get a little bit of hope, keep the momentum rolling a little bit so you don't feel like, man, we just are nowhere near them. And maybe inside the locker room they feel that way. But the fan base certainly doesn't feel that way.
Let me give you this stat here. I just synthesized this here. 286 yards allowed for the Broncos today. So now, since Patrick Mahomes became the Chiefs' starting quarterback, the Chiefs have been held below 290 yards only 3 times. And the Broncos are responsible for 2 of those 3. Specifically, Vic Fangio's defense responsible for 2 of those 3.
Yep. Like I said, this defense is good enough. Mm-hmm. They're certainly good enough to keep this team in football games. And I'm not ready to jump off the entire train when it comes to these Broncos. We said it before the game. I said it before the game. They're probably going to lose. They'll go to 2-4. They have a very good chance to get themselves right back up to 4-4 in the next 2 football games. Doesn't mean they're going to do it, but it's certainly right in front of them. They have a chance to beat these football teams. They have a chance to be alive. They have a chance to have their goal of making the playoffs right in front of them 2 weeks from now. So it's frustrating. It's a frustrating performance. It's a frustrating scoreboard, I think, more than anything. I think the scoreboard really skews just the entire feeling about this team because of really two big plays. Let's talk about some other players, though, Mase. Melvin Gordon, he's becoming I don't know if the right word is public enemy number one, but he's certainly not endearing himself to Broncos country.
No, I think he's replaced Garrett Bowles as the whipping boy of the Broncos fan base here. The guy that is going to be booted every opportunity. Now, I mean, the funny thing is, if you play box score scout, you're going to look at Melvin Gordon and say, 4 yards of carry, a touchdown, couple of receptions, not bad. But you watch the game, you know better. It's not just the 2 fumbles, which now he has 3 fumbles, and Phil has had none in his career. It's also the fact that even though he can get 4 yards of carry, the offense is just so much more explosive and dynamic with Phil back there.
Oh, clearly.
And I mean, get healthy, Phil, and get back as soon as you can. I mean, and obviously don't rush through the concussion protocol that you're going to have to go through. But with Phil, the offense and just the entire feel of it takes on a different dynamism with him out there. And again, it sort of underscores the whole thing of, why did you pay $8 million? I mean, this, with all the needs that you had on the roster, that, you went cheap at backup quarterback. You could have addressed the offensive line a little bit more. $8 million for a running back when you had Phil, it felt a little bit then, and it feels now like a luxury item.
Yeah. And I believe the flea flicker goes down as another fumble for Melvin Gordon. So
because Drew never had control of the ball.
It's definitely not on Drew.
Right, exactly. I mean, it would have, if it had been on Drew, it would have been criminal because the pitch was high. But it just, it just sort of underscores the last few years of Broncos football when they try something dynamic, they try something a little bit off kilter, and it just goes askew. I mean, I actually, as the flea flicker developed, I got a little bit excited, and then I saw the pitch, and I said some things that I would not say if I had been watching in the press box.
Fair.
Let's put it that way.
That's the advantage of being at home or here at the DNVR bar. Phil finishes the day 9 carries for 79 yards, 8.8 yards per carry, man. He was cooking, he was the offense early on, and who knows what this, how things change. Again, don't think they beat the Chiefs today. They weren't good enough. But the scoreboard might look a little bit different if Phillip Lindsay ends up running for, 179 yards if he stays in this whole game, maybe a touchdown. He continues that 8.8 yard per carry average. To me, I knew this all along, but it's very clear that Phillip Lindsay is the better running back than Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon, a little bit better at picking up blitzes. Melvin Gordon, I think, a little bit better at catching passes, although we really haven't seen him get a chance to be dynamic in that area of the game yet, other than the one big catch he had against the Steelers. Let's go through some of these other guys in terms of who played well. Try and get some positive takes here. How about Albert Okwuegbunam leading the Broncos in receiving yards and receptions today? Drew absolutely loves having him out there, and I don't think he over-targeted him today. I thought, in Albert Okwuegbunam's first game, he forced it in a little bit, maybe more than he needed to. I thought most of the attempts today, and it comes out in the stat sheet, 7 targets, 7 receptions, 60 yards, 8.6 average. Albert Okwuegbunam comes onto the field and is an instant difference maker for this Broncos offense.
Well, I think part of that is also there's the trust factor they've built up with the time at Mizzou, and that's bearing itself out. I think they're on the same page in a way that Drew has not gotten to with Jerry Jeudy just yet, for example.
Yeah,
and that's where the years of work at Mizzou pay off. I think the encouraging thing for Albert O these last 2 games is especially this game compared to the last game. Of course, he missed some opportunities in traffic, did a better job catching passes when he didn't have huge windows. And one very valid critique of Alberto coming out of Mizzou is that a lot of his receptions came in the open field. And when he had space to operate, and he doesn't have that in the NFL, but he's still able to make some plays. So this is promising. Clearly Noah Fant. I mean, he had 3 receptions today, but clearly he's not back to 100% or anywhere close on that ankle. You got to. I mean, the tip of the cap that you give Noah today is for gutting it out. Yeah. Clearly in a lot of discomfort. But, if you're looking for positives, I mean, you got to squint here, and you probably got to look at least beyond the short term. But one positive here is that I think if the Broncos are smart, they have an opportunity here to go back. They should study what the Patriots did 9-10 years ago with Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski working together. And this should be a base part of their offense.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's bar none. You got to get both of those guys involved. And we got our guy, Zach Stevens, on the show now. Great to have you, Zach. How you doing, my guy?
Fellas, I'm happy to talk with you. Maybe a bright spot to my day right now.
Yeah, it's been a tough day from the cold weather. I had to scrape my windshield this morning. That wasn't fun. But tough game for the Broncos. Zach, right now we're talking about just the positives from this game and some of the players who stood out. We talked on the offensive side of the ball. We talked about Phil. We talked about Albert Okwuegbunam. And I was getting ready to work my way to the defensive side of the ball. What do you think about the guys on the defensive side of the ball that stood out to you?
Overall, the defense played solid. Now, outside of that first drive where Vic was hard on the Broncos on that first drive, said you can't let that happen. Kareem said that probably shifted everything, or AJ Boye said that shifted the way the game went. But then after that, they cracked down. And so it's hard not to see a lot of positives on the defensive side of the ball here, guys.
Well, there is something that needs to come up, and we haven't discussed it yet. But you being there, what happened between Shelby Harris and Vic Fangio in the fourth quarter on the sideline?
Yeah, Shelby Harris was heated coming off, and obviously Vic was very, very heated at the situation that Shelby caused. Obviously, the Broncos aren't winning the game in that situation, but Vic Fangio does not want to be that team. He's made it very clear through COVID that there's no excuses. Guys have to do their job. And then on the field, you can't have that happen where, of course, the Chiefs would have had to kick a field goal there at the end of the game. But instead, Shelby has that penalty after the play, the unsportsmanlike. And so Vic was furious after that. And Vic didn't stand down after the game when asked about it. Vic said, it's unacceptable. You can't have that. He didn't say, I understand where Shelby's come from. He said that cannot happen. So after Shelby was furious, he threw his helmet on the sideline. You had a lot of players come over. Justin Simmons, one of them, to help calm him down. But guys, there was no calming Shelby Harris down. He was hot until the end of the game.
This is an easy issue for me. Vic Fangio in the right, Shelby Harris in the wrong.
Yeah,
it's easy.
Bar none. Easy. Mm-hmm. I think I read his lips. He said, they're holding me all game. They haven't called anything. I'm sure they were, and I'm sure they have. Guess what? That's what every defense across the country is dealing with right now. They just don't call holding anymore.
No.
You're welcome, Garrett Bowles. But, Shelby Harris has to know better than that. He got 1 jab in at the ref. He got 2 jabs in at the ref. He got 3 jabs in at the ref before the ref threw his flag. Finally, the ref's just not going to take that anymore. So, Shelby has to know better than that. There was a commenter on our podcast this week who said, look how great Vic Fangio has done limiting penalties from a team that was very penalty prone under Vic Fangio. It was one of our biggest critiques of of Vance Joseph was this team gets way too many penalties. They're undisciplined. That's the sign of a bad coach. Well, guess what? The sign of a coaching improvement has been the lack of penalties. How do you get a lack of penalties? By reacting like that when you're Vic Fangio and your player has a boneheaded penalty on the football field. So I understand why Shelby Harris is frustrated. He deserves to be frustrated, but he knows he crossed the line. He was in the wrong. Vic Fangio is completely within his rights to unleash on him.
And even though it wasn't a game, that penalty really didn't matter in the scheme of things at the end there. What happens if that happens next week when the Broncos and Chargers are within 3 points with 3 minutes left and Shelby Harris is pissed again about being held all game in the exact same situation? And then instead of, the Chargers tying the game with 2 minutes left, they instead get the go-ahead touchdown there. You have to nip that stuff right now. And one of the things that I liked after the game, talking to players and coaches, was the players were really pointing to themselves, saying this leadership group that we have of 5 or so needs to really step up and guide this team right now. And that's what's going to have to happen, because Vic can get pissed off at these guys, but what needs to happen is players need to take accountability for themselves and for their teammates around them.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Moving on to some of the other guys that stood out to me. How about Malik Reed, man? 4 sacks in 2 games. There was a time when we joked that DeMarcus Walker was the only guy who had ever sacked Patrick Mahomes on the Broncos because he got him in that game. That, of course, was Patrick Mahomes versus Paxton Lynch in Week 17. And for Malik Reed to get 2 sacks on Cam Newton, 2 sacks on Patrick Mahomes today, I think it really illuminates more than anything else his closing speed. When he gets there, he's not an easy guy to get away from. He's a little undersized as a pass rusher, and you sometimes see that get exposed a little bit in the running game, but it's also an advantage for him when it comes to wrangling these quarterbacks who are a lot more mobile. 4 sacks in 2 weeks for Malik Reed. You absolutely love to see it.
Huge. He's been an absolute player. It seems like the Broncos can just find these undrafted guys in the draft and then turn them into great players, and they step up when you need them. Shaq Barrett, now Malik Reed. Maybe we really should be talking about Malik Reed in that Shaq Barrett role in Denver, of course, of the role that Shaq Barrett had in Denver, because you couldn't have asked more from him. Another guy I'm going to point to is the guy that led the team in tackles today, Alexander Johnson. He kept the team in it. Initially, you have the Broncos 3 and out to start the game. Then the Chiefs go down, score a touchdown. It's like, oh my gosh, of course this is how the game's going to happen. Then another 3 and out from the Broncos. In those 2 drives, the Broncos get 6 total offensive yards. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, the Broncos are going to be down 14-0 in a blink of an eye. And Alexander Johnson comes out at the beginning of that drive, forces the fumble. That's what the Broncos need. They need to turn the ball over against anyone, but especially if you're going to come back and beat the Chiefs, even being behind 7-0. And what did that do? It gave the Broncos an opportunity to tie the game. They didn't really tie the game, but they got close. 7-6. The game felt good. Those were the plays that the Broncos needed a lot more often. And it seemed like, it being the second possession for the Chiefs getting that, it seemed like there was hope that the Broncos were going to have that formula this game, but it really ended after that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. Zach, Mase and I went back and forth on this throughout the entire first segment, as I'm sure you can imagine. The comment section is beside themselves over this topic, so we got to get your opinion. How was Drew Lock? And not just how is Drew Lock, but where do you stand on Drew Lock right now? A lot of people ready to give up on him.
Drew Lock was not good today. Drew Lock was really, really not good today. And the thing that I'm concerned about the most isn't his numbers. And of course, the eye test, he didn't pass that again today in my mind. But what I'm concerned about is the total output by this team. You have 120 or 112 rushing yards in the first half, and you're only able to put up 9 points because the passing game just isn't there to execute when they need to. And I think Vic Fangio nailed it on the head after the game. He didn't say Drew Lock had a terrible game. He said there's things he needs to improve on, especially when there were timely throws that needed to be made. Those did not happen. So today was a really, really bad game for Drew Lock, statistically, everything. But what I am concerned about, and something that I can't get over, is the lack of points that this Broncos offense is putting up with Drew Lock as their quarterback. Yes, they went to Houston last year, put up, 38 points, 37 points. It was a great performance. But the lack of points this offense is putting up is really concerning me. You have 14 points against Tennessee when Drew plays the full game. Last week, you had 18 points. All 6 were field goals. And then today, you only have 16 points. That is concerning me, and that's something that I'm starting to not be able to get over. But am I giving up on Drew? No, I'm not giving up on Drew. He hasn't even started near close to a full season, so you're not giving up on him. But there are things that, for me, are hard to overcome and hard to overlook right now.
Yeah, that's interesting that you kind of focused on that, Zach, and I'm kind of focused on the fact that everything I'm seeing that he's doing wrong is something that is what he did wrong at Mizzou and why he was a second round pick. And I'll admit I have a different perspective than most people on Drew Lock because I did go to Mizzou and I've been watching him literally since his first start for the Tigers back in 2015. So maybe I have too much of a micro view on Drew Lock compared to most, but I the stuff that made me nervous about him going into the draft, I'm seeing it, and I'm not seeing it get corrected.
Well,
The stare downs, the back foot throws, trying to play hero ball, I'm seeing it all.
Well, Mase, what concerns me on top of that is something Drew Lock said after the game. He said, my mistakes of not looking to the third and fourth read, looking first, second read, and then trying to make a play and getting out of the pocket when he actually doesn't really need to, and scrambling and doing things out of what he shouldn't be doing right then. He said, that's something I need to work on now. And he said, it's something that's going to turn around. And that's something that, I like he's positive about it. But it's kind of going to what you said, this is how long does it take for it not to turn around until you're saying, okay, this won't turn around.
I'm getting nervous, I have to admit. I mean, I want the rest of the season's about learning about him, but I'm getting a little nervous.
Yeah, and I think that's just as football fans and football media and football observers, it's hard to not look at what was just happened in front of you. Every week is so important in football that it's just really hard to say, like, well, we'll see what happens 4 weeks from now. A month of games feels like an eternity when it comes to football, and because it is. So I think you guys are both correct. Zach, you're right. They have to score more points. To me, I'm trying to look at the process, trying to see if the process is right. Today, it just wasn't. And so, like, they took a step back. Drew took a step back. The offense took a step back. Now, there's you can make excuses for them, and I think there are a few out there. But, again, you only have so many games here. I'm trying to look at the process. Last week, I thought the process was fantastic. This week, the process was bad. You didn't see a connection on a deep ball. You didn't see guys dropping good passes, except for maybe KJ Hamler, which it wasn't a really great pass. Shouldn't have ended in an interception. Unfortunate for Drew. It happens to all quarterbacks. I didn't like the process today. But overall, I've really liked the process from Drew Lock. And that's what I'm going to stick to right now is overall, I'm seeing the process there. I'm seeing them get in position. I'm seeing them make play. I'm seeing Drew make plays. I'm seeing him convert third downs at a good rate. I'm seeing him avoid sacks at a good rate, which, again, another thing he didn't do well today. So just got to see eventually the process has to turn into results.
Right.
And he has the rest of this season and maybe more, depending on how the Broncos feel about it, to turn the process into results. Today, the process was bad. The results were bad. The weather was bad. The team was bad. Everything was bad. And it sucks because I think Broncos fans were ready to be excited. And I think they were excited going into the game. And I hate that everyone's feeling the way they are right now because I thought, maybe one of these days this team's going to reward them for their excitement. Today was not that day. So now you get next week. You get to go up against Justin Herbert, who was freaking awesome today. Yeah. Finally got himself a win against the Jaguars. And maybe then is when the process starts to turn to results. But it has to happen eventually. For now, I'm going to be the guy who says I like the process so far. Not today, but on the whole, I like the process so far. Eventually it has to turn into results. Zach, what did we hear from inside the locker room after the game? Anything notable other than what you've told us from Drew and Vic?
We're at 2-4 right now, and we knew the Broncos were still afloat at 2-4 after beating New England this week. But now the Broncos know this is where their season either sinks or it swims, and you are really getting that talk coming out of the locker room. Every single player pointing to how this is when we push through. This is when we turn around. This was a way bigger picture look from inside the locker room than you typically get after a game. And maybe it's because they didn't want to focus on how bad the game was, how it was their biggest loss to Kansas City since 2004, how they've lost 10 straight. They didn't want to be in the moment. Instead, they wanted to look big picture. And I think that's good because I think if the Broncos know how exactly big this next week's game is and the entirety of things, that's good. Of course, the message today was everyone's going to stick in there. Everyone's going to hang in there. But I think it's good that they're taking this big look picture, because we've said the next 2 games, if they lose both of them at 2-6, I'm sorry, but the season's absolutely over. It's hanging on a thread if you go 1-1 and you're at 3-5. So they know how big these next 2 games are.
I might even say the next 2 weeks are the most important that Vic Fangio has had since he became the head coach of this team.
Yeah,
because you are talking about if you lose, if it is bad, if it is that disaster, and you lose the next 2 to the Chargers and Atlanta, you are probably in an unrecoverable spin, at least for relevancy this year. And then the questions about Vic Fangio are going to multiply.
Yep, exactly. And guys, speaking of the game next week, of course, it's Drew Lock, Justin Herbert. I can't wait to break down that game leading up to it and the game itself. But Gardner Minshew, who, I mean, we all love Minshew mania, but there was a report just before the game today that if he didn't play well, he was going to be benched, and Minshew mania was pretty much going to be blown up for the rest of eternity. And he put up 29 points against the Chargers today. So I don't need to see 29 from Drew next week or else he's done, but I need to see more than this 14, 16, because the Chargers defense is giving up some points. So it's not, to me right now, it's not go out and play better than Justin Herbert. It's can we do something similar to Gardner Minshew at least?
And Minshew really not even that good. 14 of 27, 173 and 2 touchdowns. But heck, that feels as a stat line a hell of a lot better than what Drew Lock has done the last 2 weeks. Now we know last week was a little bit of an aberration. This week, I don't know. 14 of 27, 173 yards, 2 touchdowns. If Drew does that next week and the Broncos win, I think people will feel good. If they lose, I don't know about that. Herbert, just outstanding. 27 of 43, 347 yards, 3 TDs. He's hitting throws that he didn't hit in college. It's wild to see. Maybe the Broncos have an answer for him, because I'll tell you what, they allow 39 points. They're not going to win. They need to figure out a little bit of an answer to him, make him come back down to earth. Drew Lock absolutely is going to need a way to find a way to get into the mid to high 20s. You know, I say it every week. You got to give up less than 24 and score more than 24. That should be your goal going into every week. Weirdly enough, the Broncos didn't do either thing right today, even though I think the defense was pretty damn good. Didn't even allow one single third down conversion in the entire game. I'll take that, bar none, from any defense every week. But, you know, if you can do that to the Chiefs, you should be able to do a lot better to the Chargers. Same thing goes for the offense. You need to do a lot better against the Chargers.
Although that being said, I wouldn't be, you know, you're talking about Minshew here a moment ago. I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss him. I mean, the guy does have 13 touchdowns, 5 picks this year. And, you know, it seems like the bigger problem for the Jaguars than Minshew is the fact their defense has given up 30 plus 6 straight games. So, you know, it's not like Minshew's chopped liver right now, even though the team sucks.
Yeah, no, those are just the reports that I saw coming out before the game.
Yeah.
On top of those passing numbers from Herbert, Ryan, Herbert was also the leading rusher for the Chargers with 66 yards and added a touchdown. Hey, maybe this is an opportunity for the Broncos defense to kind of break, not fully break Justin Herbert next week, but the Broncos defense can bring him back to earth and Drew Lock can outperform him. And also, what's on the line next week? The worst record in the division. You're both 2-4 going into this game. And of course, what Drew Lock does have on his side is he's still a winning quarterback in the NFL, where Justin Herbert is not. He just got his first win today. Well, if you lose next week and Herbert gets that, the Chargers have a better record. Those records start to even out more. So it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to that one. This one is a tough one to evaluate much, just because it was so bad in a lot of areas for the Broncos and kind of fluky a little bit on the scoreboard with just 2 massive TDs. Anything else that you guys have on your mind as we wrap up the show?
Well, speaking of Drew Lock, last week's stat line, you know, I wrote a story that I think you guys would agree with the headline of Drew Lock played better than his stats would suggest. This week, no, I think the stat line was kind of spot on.
Yep. It was. One thing I want to address, I saw some people in the comments talking about Phillip Lindsay being injury prone. I just don't know what you want from the guy. Like, you know, we're talking about a broken wrist, a turf toe injury and a concussion are the three main injuries people pointing to. Like, it's not like he's going out with a bruised rib or a hamstring or a shoulder injury one after another. Obviously, you don't want this to happen your whole career, but I just, give the guy a break for three injuries that have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah, and speaking of giving guys breaks, the Broncos caught a break today going into the game with the injury bug. Do not seem as fortunate leaving. We don't have any injury updates after the game, but obviously a lot of guys that were injured during the game. Most notably, their best offensive player by 15 miles today, guys, with Phillip Lindsay. But it does look like he has a concussion, and man, I hope he's back for next week just because of how freaking good he was in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who else ended up on the injury list there, Zach?
Who else? Because Vic didn't give any updates after the game. He did say after the game that Fant was not playing 100%, and I think that was pretty obvious throughout the game. I mean, besides those last couple catches with under 2 minutes left in the game, he did nothing. I mean, Albert O, or how did they pronounce it on the broadcast? Did they get it right on the broadcast?
No.
Yeah, okay, because I can tell you in the press box it was terrible.
What did they say
as well?
Okwebunam is what they said.
I think actually Kevin Harlan early in the game, I heard an Okubunam. Yeah.
Good try. Good effort. You've had 14 days now to learn this name.
And you've had about 14 targets to him as well.
Yeah. You know what? If we were not in the pandemic realm, I think Albert O would have had the opportunity to say what he would tell broadcasters at Mizzou, and that is, it's okay if you just refer to me as Albert O on the broadcast. He gave his blessing to the guys from ESPN and the SEC network to just call him Albert O. So
I revoke that.
Say Albert O.
It's not that hard.
I know
it's really not that hard.
I mean,
I would rather hear
it.
Yeah. If we can get it right here, that's fine. I am just sick of having to hear this on a week-to-week basis. Just say Albert O and move on. Some of these games when the Broncos are playing like crap are a chore, but it's making it a painful chore when I have to hear his name butchered time and again. At least didn't hear OJ Moody's name messed up today, so there's that.
I'm not giving professionals any. I'm not letting them off the hook when it comes to pronouncing the names of the players.
Guys, today, speaking of that guy, Albert Okwebunam, a perfect 7 for 7, led the Broncos in receiving. I mean, that's just incredible.
Yeah, he's a beast. We still didn't really get to see a full Noah Fant and a full Albert Okwebunam, but you just see, when you see Noah have a great game, you see Albert have a great game, you come away saying, man, if those two ever click on the same day, it's going to be a day.
Yep, exactly. And you can just tell how much Drew loves them. So that seems like a great 4th round pick right now.
Absolutely. All right. Well, again, I want to give a thank you to Breckenridge Brewery for bringing you these lives after the games. Thanks to everyone who followed. Thanks to everyone who interacted with us. But for today, that's going to wrap it up for us. We will catch you tomorrow morning on the DNVR Broncos podcast. Have a great rest of your Sunday.